Hello everyone, and welcome to the Board Gaming Doctor. My name is Phil, and I'll be your Board Game Doctor today. In this Rosenblog for February 2024, I wanted to go through some quick news, take you through the expansion to Fields of Arle, the Tea and Trade expansion, how it plays, and my thoughts on it, and then finally discuss a topic that has been on my mind, which is board game recommendations for folks who enjoy some of the more classic and popular games out there right now, focusing on both Rosenberg games and non-Rosenberg games to recommend. For the first bit of news, the 10th anniversary edition of Patchwork is coming out later this year. It will feature new art and the Automa deck for solo play. I know that through the years, different editions have come out, not only with new art, but with rebalancing of the tiles, as with the Halloween edition in particular. I don't think this new 10th anniversary edition will contain the balanced tiles. I think they will go with the original ones, but time will tell and more details are to come. You can play the original edition, the Halloween edition, and the two other editions on Board Game Arena, which I believe are the Americana and the Polish versions, for what it's worth. But if you don't own Patchwork physically, or want to grab it for the Automa deck officially, then I think this 10th anniversary edition may be a good option for you. In other news, we've had some more information about when some of Rosenberg's games are coming out this year. Capstone recently announced that Tangram City, the Essen release of Rosenberg from last year, in addition to Plantanumbo, of course, but I think this was his only solo design that was announced and released at Essen. Anyway, this game will be shipping from Capstone and arriving in April of later this year. And finally, Clash of Magic Schools, which is a re-implementation of Rosenberg's Babel, will be set to release in June of this year, according to the publisher ELO and distributor Flat River Group. Let's talk about Tea and Trade, the first expansion to Fields of Arle. This expansion was published in 2017 and designed primarily by Tito Lorenz. There are some major changes that this expansion makes to the base game, so let's briefly talk about what those changes are, and then I'll conclude with some of my thoughts. First, this expansion adds a third player to the game. To accommodate this, there are additional worker placement spots and building displays that are added to the game, creating more options for you to place workers at, of course, but also creates more of a diversity of buildings to choose from during the game. There are additional spots and displays for the 1 to 2 player game too, because of the additional buildings that this game comes with. There are 23 buildings added to the game, and just like with the base game, some buildings are included in every single game, like the orange buildings, which have their name printed on the board that you have to play with every game. But some are randomly mixed in with the original buildings, like the green buildings and so forth, to create a more diverse playthrough every game and in between games. In addition, as the name of the expansion implies, a new resource in Tea is added to the game. Not only does Tea give you points at the end of the game, but they can also be used to give you more powerful actions. When taking an action that includes a tool tracker, like the shovel pairs action, for example, you may discard 1 Tea to take the action as if your tool marker is 1 space to the right, thus creating a more powerful action. When you upgrade your Tea to his backside, the East Frisian Tea, you may discard it to treat the tool marker as having moved 2 spaces to the right, increasing the strength further. Finally, if you discard 2 East Frisian Tea tokens, you may take 1 action twice in a row. To acquire Tea, additional vehicles have been added to the game in the form of ships. Not only can these 2 types of ships give you additional food during the game, but also serve as spots for you to upgrade your resources with. And in addition, with the trading ship in particular, you may pay a price that is included on the harbor board, which goes into your individual tableau, and it tells you what price to pay to gain certain resources on those trading ships. You don't have to place a resource from your own supply into the ship to flip it over or to trade for it. For example, you can pay 3 food to place Tea onto every spot of your trading ship and so forth, and so that comes directly from the supply. Finally, the last addition to this game is with the ditches. These are little wooden tokens that kind of look like the fences from Agricola, but you can take an action on the new action board to dig ditches, and some buildings allow you to do so as well. But this leads you to placing these wooden tokens onto your farm board in between the land spaces. You start at the dike line, which is that starting moor tile that has 4 peat on it at the beginning of the game, and you build out the ditches in whichever direction from that in between these land spaces. The benefit of doing so is that if you surround a land space, or not completely surround it, but have at least 2 ditches touching a land space, and if there's no building on it, it becomes what is called dehydrated, so it allows you to do certain things. First, you can keep 3 sheep on that tile, and if there are 2 sheep there at the end of wintertime, those sheep, if you have 2 on them, may breed as if they were inside of a stall or stable, giving you that 3rd sheep on that tile. Also, if you take the farmer action when you get to place the farming tiles, such as the grain or the flax tiles, onto your space using a plow, if the land spaces are surrounded by at least 2 ditches, you can place 2 plows or 2 fields with 1 plow instead of just 1 field per plow. Finally, if you surround one of the moor spaces, the elongated spaces that you need to flip over for more peat, if you have 2 ditches touching one of those tiles, you may flip it over for free without having to take the respective actions from the worker placement board. So, those are the changes, and now for my thoughts on the expansion. As a disclaimer, I've only played the expansion solo, and have not discovered the 3-player game yet. For the base game, I'm a big fan of Fields of Arle, first of all. I like the cozy nature of the theme in the game, and although it seemingly feels like an open sandbox type of point salad game, meaning that whatever you do, you will get roughly the same amount of points as another player, albeit for some slight efficiency decisions during the game, Fields of Arle, the more I play, feels more like a cutthroat game than I had previously imagined. My goal is to eventually write and publish a more in-depth strategy guide to this game, which I think would be beneficial to people in general, because this game is playable for free on yukata.de. The more I see gameplay from that website of high-ranked individuals, the more I've come to a conclusion that there is a right way to play this game, or in other words, a more correct way to play this game, and that some strategies are better than others. I feel that the base game is somewhat close to being quote-unquote solvable, because there is a relative lack of variability to the game. It feels more like a chess-like type of game than other Euro games currently published and are out there, and I feel like Fields of Arle more closely resembles other Rosenblog games like Or at Labora, and even A Feast for Odin, in my personal opinion, feeling more chess-like in nature. In sum, I felt like there was a lack of variability with the building tiles in Fields of Arle, although there is a little bit of diversity there, and each game can be potentially different. And with my preliminary data, it seemed like collecting animals and doing a more focused husbandry strategy seemed to be the most successful avenue of play. The expansion, I feel, tackles these 2 facts about Fields of Arle, the animal strategy being predominant as well as the lack of variability. The added 23 buildings not only deal with the new components of the game, but they add diversity to some of the other strategies that you may explore as you play the game that are inherent in the base game. In particular, there are a lot of buildings that interact with the new ditches, and I think that ditches are a great way to efficiently turn over moors, as well as serve as a cheap way to have sheep reproduce, as if it were a stall or stable. In other words, I feel like if you're trying to accomplish these things, which you're normally trying to do in a base game of Fields of Arle, flipping over those moor tiles to remove those negative points as well as get more peat, which you need anyway, as well as creating, if you're going for the more predominant strategy of animals and building out stalls and stables, if that is your goal, then ditches are a great way to, I feel like, accomplish those in a more efficient and even cheaper way. In the limited play time that I've had with the expansion, it does feel like it strengthens what is already present with having an animal-based strategy. There are not only the ditches, but some buildings that help you along with the strategy, but I feel like it makes it easier for all who are playing to enable that same strategy, meaning there are more options for players to pursue animals. You may have one player who is able to build the stalls and the stables, and they get the points from that, but they do pay the price and the cost in resources. Perhaps while that avenue is closed down for another player, they may be able to pursue ditches and take that action and allow for you to reproduce animals, sheep in particular, at the same rate as the first player, and so on. And perhaps the third player could for example, get a building that can allow you to do so. So I do feel like it opens up that strategy that is predominant and makes it more widely available for players, but I think it does open up the floor for other strategies to pursue as well, and other predominant ways to gain points. I think the tea resource is really fun. It helps you build up to a combo play that could really put you forward in the game. In my experience, using the tea that you start with, which is 3 resources of tea, to give some actions a boost that could really benefit you through the game, such as the shovel pair action, creating more space earlier on in the game to enable ditches and spaces for your sheep to grow into, and so on and so forth. That felt really strong to do so early on. Taking actions twice in a row was really fun, and for example, when you built up enough resources and pulled off a double building action in the same turn, denying other players those buildings and adding them to your own tableau, that felt really fun. To me, the weakest portion of the expansion was the harbor tile and ships. They don't allow you to travel to other places, from what I understand, so you can't really, diversify your vehicles and ships to be able to travel faster and getting those points and food. But having a trading ship came in handy when I needed extra wood, for example, or needed some tea to build up to those combo plays later on in the game. But other than that, it didn't seem like it benefited the strategies that I pursued and that I had internalized from playing the base game. Perhaps in a 3-player game, like I've mentioned before, where things become a little bit more cutthroat and you need extra options to accomplish what you want to do, the ships may play more of a role as a secondary option to gaining those resources and when other spots on the board are taken. Regardless, resources were tight, and I felt like I couldn't quite, on a solo play, get into the ship business and utilize them towards my strategies, on top of everything else that I had assumed would give me more points at the end of the game. Needless to say, I do need to play this expansion more to be more familiar with the building tiles and to see how other strategies become more viable because of those buildings. However, I really like the sense of variability they provide, creating a diverse experience to the casual Fields of Arle players who do not go into it more competitively and just want something more variable out of the box. I feel like it makes the game less solvable and more of a discovery every time, which approximates how I feel about Agricola, with the variable amount of cards and expansions that it has to offer, and some of the other Rosenblog games boasting a more out-of-the-box variability, like Newsford, for example. This expansion, I feel, adds a lot of good things for the veteran Fields of Arle player to enjoy about the game, without tacking on too much complexity as well. To me, this is a step down from what Farmers of the Moor did to Agricola, or Frantic Fiends did for Caverna, which entirely renovated the game. And this expansion, I feel, is more similar to what Norwegians did for A Feast for Odin, which added minor tweaks to the game and added a few things here and there to make the game feel different, yet tighter and more of an enjoyable experience, perhaps patching up some of the weaknesses from the base game. In sum, I highly recommend this expansion to those who want, first of all, a 3-player experience with Fields of Arle, or who just want to explore more from this game with the additional components and modules and buildings, etc. And I personally can't wait to play it more and really want to.